Happy January, friends. It is, as always, incredible that we are already in the new year. Bee season has begun. I mean, this is the start of bee season. The days are getting longer, the queens are starting to lay, and so this is the unofficial start of the new bee season. We have a lot of things to cover. This is when it starts getting exciting. If we haven't met yet, my name is Blake. I'm one of the owners of the Bee Supply. I've been keeping bees for 20 plus years at this point, and I've gone from about three hives in my backyard to over 30,000. And I love these webinars where I can just take practical information, distill it down in a way that's helpful for what you need to know this month to be a successful beekeeper. So we've got a lot we're going to cover today. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Hope you had a happy new year. And welcome to the new the start really of bee season. Before we go too far, I am so excited about this book. I talked about it on our last webinar. Pre-sales are phenomenal. We are selling so many of these through pre-sales. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll go to our website where you can pre-order this book. We have a big shipment of them coming in to the NABI conference next week. So if you're going to the Bee Expo, the NABI conference, however you want to say it, we've got several hundred books showing up there. That's the first place they'll be physically for sale. And then if you go to our website, you can go ahead and pre-order, and these will be showing up in the next, 3 or so weeks. And then we'll start shipping out those pre-orders. But I so appreciate you guys going out and buying a book. Cayman and I have worked very hard writing this over a number of years. I'm so proud of it. I was so excited to actually, or I'm so excited that we're actually about to start getting some copies in. So, if you're new to beekeeping or if you've been keeping bees a number of years, I'm convinced this is a helpful book for you. It basically covers everything, all the questions that you need answered in the world of beekeeping. So, anywhere from how to use pollen patties to what kind of woodenware do you need to use to what to do if your hive is queenless to how to replace a queen, how to find a queen. You know, virtually any question that you have in beekeeping, this book has an answer for it. And what I'm really excited about, it's written from mine and Cayman's perspective of practical beekeeping. So this isn't a scientific handbook. This is thousands and thousands of hours in the bee yard working through every issue mentioned in the book. And this is how to fix it or how to do it in a way that actually works. So I think you'll find it helpful. I encourage people to use it as a reference book. You can just sit down and read it front to back, and that'll be an incredible education. Or you can just hang on to it. And when you have an issue in your bees, you can go to the book and see what Cayman and I would do in that situation. So I'm so proud of it. It's been a long labor of love getting it done. And I'm convinced that it will be a helpful book to you and your beekeeping journey. So thank you to everyone who's been pre-ordering it. Scan the QR code and you can get a pre-ordered copy as well, and they'll be in a few weeks. If you haven't ordered your bees for 2026, now is your chance. Check out our website as well. We've got Nooks, single stories, packages, queens. We've got a variety of types of packages this year. We have the Italian, Carnolian, Saskatraz, and then the Randy Oliver Golden West packages as well. So we have a lot of package options that we've never had in the past. Our pre-sales are through the roof with bees. So hurry and place those orders before all of our early dates are sold out. Okay, Sherry, what do we have going on for January topics?
January topics. I want to add one more thing about the book. One of the probably the most helpful parts of it is that in the front of it, there's a not just a table of contents, but every topic, everything is listed out. So you've got a main topic and then all of the subtopics in
Yeah,
it. So you super easy as a field guide to just go in and quickly locate where you need to go, read that little part, and head on to the next topic, and maybe 50 pages later. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out.
yep, great point.
Super. Okay, January. I know. And it's like, wow, it's still summer and it's hot outside, but y'all, it really is winter. But I am super excited about this first article. Week one, if you've signed up and you're in the know, you're going to get an email that's going to talk about how the winter solstice affects honeybees. I've never written an article on this before, if you can believe that. As many, I don't know, where am I at? Like 1,000 articles I've written over my beekeeping journey. I've never written one on this topic, but I did for you this month. It's super interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in a minute. That's week one. Week two, how to protect your apiary from varmints, livestock, and wild animals. Okay, I can tell you personally, we have had this. We've had various bee yards all over the place in different scenarios, and one of those has bugged us somewhere. So this is a great article if you've had any issues or if you want to prevent issues in a new bee yard. Week three, Varroa destructor, the life cycle of a killer. That sounds so dramatic and so bad, but it kind of is. But this is going to be we're going to roll in to start talking to you about Varroa mites. It's the beginning of the year, and you're just going to have to go with it. We've got to get started, start ramping up our testing, and we'll start talking more and more about it as the next month and 2, 3 months come along. Week four, reversing brood boxes, when and why, and if you really need to, because that's a pretty, do I, don't I, this person said I do, this person said I don't. Anyway, also, I want you to make sure that when you go on the website, you can find any of these articles already live now under the TBS monthly articles or Be Help and Answers. And under that little magnifying glass, just type in that topic and it will come up and show you the article. Or sign up for the email and be in the know, and we'll send it straight to your inbox each week. And don't forget, ask Blake Bot. He's got some quick, fast answers. All right, Blake, blow that slide. Here we go. January article focus, and it's on the winter solstice and how it affects honeybees. I'm gonna tell you, this is something we've known about probably within, let's see, we got bees in March in our beekeeping journey. And so we really didn't know about it till the following year. But I remember our mentor going, well, it was December 21st. It's either 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It's like right in those few days every year. And he said, bees are going to start thinking it's winter. I mean, start thinking it's spring. And I was like, but we haven't even started winter because we're in Southeast Texas. What do you mean? That's really a thing, y'all. And the further in your beekeeping journey, the more you'll realize how much that one event, that one day is just literally like opening the gates for the bees and their worlds start to change. The points I want to make, winter solstice marks the shortest day of the year. And so that was the day, I don't know if anybody noticed, but it really was a short day. I think it was cloudy here, so it was already going to be a short day. And it was just like, my goodness, I don't even think I need to get on my pajamas. It's that short. But there's several things about this. It increases daylight hours, so it tells the bees spring is coming, spring mode. The subtle signs, and I wanted to read a couple of things. And Blake already said this, the queen eases back into laying, and she really and truly does. And I know this is going to be geographic. Some of you that are knee deep or head deep in snow, this is even though the solstice has happened, they are doing some things differently in their hive. It just depends on where you are regionally of how quickly this is going to happen or how obvious it is. Workers start eating more honey to fuel brood rearing. This is a big deal, because what ends up happening is that as they're doing that, even though it's slowly, it's requiring more energy needed to heat the hive, okay, because they need to keep that brood at what? I want to hear somebody that's been reading and listening to Blake and I all these years, 94 to 95 degrees. One of you said it, I heard it. That is important to keep this brood going, or it won't work, right? Even because it's in theory cold outside. The more the energy they use, the more food is needed. Truly, one of the absolute reasons why so many hives starve in early spring. They've totally gone through their food stores, and it's a real issue if they've got brood in there. kind of in the making. And I'm gonna tell you something, we've run into something that's in on my notes here, but we've run into something probably different than we've had in multiple years. We've had 80-degree weather. We'll be at 80, it's 1st of January now. We'll be at 83 or 84 today. And our bees are out there. What do you think they're doing? They're flying around looking for food because it's warm and it's spring in their eyes. It's a beautiful day. So we're going to find ourselves as soon as it pops back the other direction, which it will, that they're going to run out of stores. So y'all, every one of you, I want you to promise yourselves and your bees, you're going to keep an eye on those winter stores because they're going to go through them like nobody's business on warm days because there's nothing out here for them to get to. All right, so that was my big point to say. The behavior starts to shift. They're going to start moving. Some of them will even move the whole clusters up. Talking about how, reversing brood boxes. They'll truly just go poof. They'll start moving up in an instant to try to follow that food. Strong colonies are often going to be brood rearing earlier. Weaker colonies, they may wait a little bit. Some simply don't have the numbers to even start, and they're going to have to wait for you to really start supplementing and maybe some brood food like some pollen and so forth a little later on. And I'm going to wrap this up with what you should keep in mind. Watch your food stores closely. Take away. Avoid opening the hive too much. Okay, be careful with that. You want to test it with the tilt test, picking it up to make sure it's still good and heavy, but avoid too much opening up to break their propolis and also messing with them. And get ready for an early buildup. We've had a super warm winter for us this year, and we could be looking at some serious numbers, serious population explosions sooner than we want, and expect weather variations. And truly, that's what we're going through right now. I expect that we're going to see some super cold weather that the bees are going to be taken back on coming up here. Oh, probably Valentine's Day, because that's usually how it goes. If we're this warm now, Valentine's Day is going to be cold and miserably wet. So I don't know about your area, but watch what's going on. Take your weather into consideration, but know the winter solstice, we are now longer days. Spring's coming. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry. That was wonderful as always. Okay, let's jump out in the bee yard and see what the bees are up to, even in the cold, and then we will jump back into the classroom.
Time of year, I really like to start thinking about rotating frames. Once frames get old and dark, it's a good time to pull them out of the hive and throw them away and get new frames in your hive. And really my favorite time to pull them out of the hive is early spring, late winter, early spring, before the bees really start brooding up. But you can start preparing for it this time of year. Now, if a hive dies, which unfortunately happens, or you have a completely empty box, you can pull the old dark frames out and throw them away. That's not an issue. The tricky thing is if you have a hive that doesn't die for 2 or 3 years, which is kind of hard to do these days, but if you do have a hive that doesn't die for 2 or 3 years, you might want to try to rotate out old frames while the hive is still living. And so what I like to do is in the late fall, early winter, kind of right where we are now, I'll go through a hive and I'll identify the old dark frames. So this hive really only has one old dark frame, and I'll show it to you. So this is an old frame. You can see the wood's pretty old. The comb is pretty dark in color. It's not terrible, but it's not great. I'm going to go ahead and swap it out. And by the way, you can see this is completely capped honey, and it kind of has a white, it's a little bit white on top. That's very common to see in the winter months. They kind of get this white patina on the capped honey, and that's pretty normal. But, so I've identified a frame I want to rotate out. As long as it does not have any brood on it, and it's just a frame of honey like this one, I'm going to get it all the way to the outside of my box. So I'm just going to get it on the very outside frame, and I'm just going to leave it just like that. What's going to happen is if the bees need that food, it's there for them all winter. I don't want to throw away a frame full of honey because the bees might need it. So I'm going to leave it in there, and then I'm going to come back you know, late winter, early spring, as the bees are starting to brood up, flowers are starting to bloom, and I'm going to check on this frame. And if it's full of honey still or not, I'm going to pull out that frame. I might, if it's full of honey, I'll set it out, let the bees rob the honey out of it, and then I'll throw it away. But that way it's on the outside edge. If it were closer into the middle, there's a good chance in the late winter, early spring, the queen is going to start laying eggs in that frame. And then I don't want to throw it away because now it has, you know, eggs or larvae or brood all over it, or the bees have started filling that valuable early pollen in on that frame. But on the outside edge, now I've guaranteed that it's there over the winter if the bees need that honey, or, and I've guaranteed that I can pull it out and get rid of it in the late winter, early spring before the queen starts laying brood on it. So that's what I do. You know, if you have 2 or 3 frames of old frames you want to get rid of, as long as they don't have brood on them, right now, shuffle them to the outside edges, and then you can pull them out and throw them away in a few months. So it's pretty simple. That's all you have to do, and you can do that in both boxes. And it's great to kind of always be rotating those old frames to the outside edge so that you can get rid of them. Usually I recommend rotating comb about every 10 years. If you buy bees in a nook or a single story hive, they're probably going to have some old frames mixed in, and so you can go ahead and start rotating those out. But about every 10 years is what I consider best management practices to rotate out those old dark frames. If you get a new hive or new equipment, I recommend getting a Sharpie and writing the year on the tops of the frames, and that'll help you rotate out those old frames and know what year they were brand new. So hopefully that helps and helps you get rid of some of those old frames, which can be a little more contaminated and heavy with that old wax. And this is a great method to get them rotated out if the hive doesn't die. A common question that we frequently get is, hey, I'm a new beekeeper. Should I buy a package of bees? Should I buy a nook? Or should I buy a complete single with bees in it? The good news is it's up to you. There's no wrong way to get started in beekeeping. There's a few pros and cons to keep in mind as you're considering starting this beekeeping journey. A package of bees is the cheapest way to get into beekeeping. It's significantly less than other options. It's just this plastic package, and it's going to have about 3 pounds of bees on the inside of it. So it's really simple. When you receive this package, you just pop the lid open, and you're going to dump this package of bees into a complete hive that you have prepared before the package of bees arrives. Now this will have a queen in it, so it'll have a mated queen in a cage that you'll install. We've got other videos showing you how to install a package of bees into your hive, and we'll certainly share that with you once you make a purchase. So great option if you're trying to cut corners or be on the cheaper side of beekeeping. I know it's an expensive hobby, so if you're trying to keep the cost down, this is the way to go. If you have old equipment from maybe a previous beekeeping journey, if this is your second year of beekeeping and your hive died, this is a great way to repopulate existing comb or equipment. So the other option, the next step up, is a nook. And so this is what we call a 5-frame nook. This outer plastic container is disposable, and it'll come with 5 frames of bees in it. So this will have 5 frames on the inside, and all those frames will be drawn comb. And so it'll have a honeycomb already drawn out in 5 frames. It'll have a laying queen. It'll have 2 to 3 frames already full of brood, and it'll have 3 to 4 pounds of bees in it. It'll also have a frame or 2 full of honey. So this is a nook or a nucleus hive. It's a little baby hive that's ready to go. And so you would take this home with you, and then you would install this in the equipment that you've bought and set up beforehand. And it's easy as that. You just transfer the frames out of this nook box into this empty box that you've bought ahead of time, and you're good to go. Now this builds up much faster because you've already got developing baby bee population. The queen's already accepted, the queen's already laying. So this is just a faster way and a more reliable way to get started in beekeeping. The final option is to buy a complete hive that's already ready to go. Now you've got to buy this equipment. Even if you buy the nook or the single, you still have to buy this equipment, but we can also sell this equipment populated with bees for you. This is the fastest and best guarantee to make a honey crop in your first year. Still no guarantee that you will, but this is your best shot. So It comes with all the brand new equipment, the bottom board, the lid, already full of bees, ready to go. All you have to do is take this home with you, put it out in your backyard or your field, put another box on top for them to start filling with brood and honey, and you're good to go. There's no installation, the queen's already laying. It's the most foolproof way to get started in beekeeping. It's the most expensive, but in reality, when you price it out, if you look at the price of a nook or a package and the price of all the equipment together, it's not that much of a difference.
Welcome back into the classroom, guys. Hopefully that was helpful for all of you. We've got some great questions. I love doing these Q&As. You guys send in the best questions. So, Sherry, what do we have this month?
Wow. And I had to narrow it down because this is really, everybody starts going, oh gosh, what do I do now? What do I do
Yeah.
now? I don't know what to do. All right. Number one, I checked my bees Tuesday, and that probably wasn't this Tuesday, but a couple of Tuesdays ago, and they were going crazy on the dry pollen fever I have out. And y'all, I've had this phone call just this week. Is that normal for this time of year, or should I continue to fill that feeder with dry pollen?
Great question. It's very normal. I mean, this is the time of year when you expect to see the bees all over that dry pollen. I mean, they love dry pollen when there is no natural pollen available. So that's when they're really going to go crazy. So when there's no natural pollen and it's warm outside, which is exactly what a lot of the country is seeing, those bees are going to go crazy for that dry pollen. As to should you keep refilling it, I would. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to make a massive difference for your bees. But if they're really foraging on it and the weather's warm, it's not going to hurt anything at all. And it's going to really help discourage them, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's going to help discourage them from coming out and foraging on your neighbor's animal food, etc. So yeah, I would keep refilling that dry pollen feeder.
I got that phone call, that very phone call. Lady was not a beekeeper called, and her chickens won't eat because there's so many bees on her chicken feed.
Yeah.
And of course, I had to send her to our website to purchase some dry pollen because even the cold weather didn't run them off. I said, well, it will eventually, but
Yeah.
you can do that
Yes.
kind of, even if you're
Yes.
not a beekeeper. All
Yep.
right. Number two, any suggestion? Oh, and I hate this because I've seen them on large roaches in your hives.
Yeah,
Just
they
big one.
love the warmer weather inside the hive, the warmer temperatures. So, I wouldn't do anything about it. They don't hurt anything. They don't cause a problem. They're just there because it's warm or the conditions are right. I know it's annoying. So I would just leave them alone. Putting some sort of a roach poison in the hive is going to be risky for the bees. So I wouldn't put anything in there to try to, you can open it and crush them physically.
Oof.
But they aren't going to cause a problem for the bees. They're more just annoying for the beekeeper.
Totally. And if you're, a girly girl like me, and then you don't want to smash it because it makes a really horrible noise, you just shoo it away.
There you go.
It
Shooing it
works.
away works too. Yes.
It does. All right. With older boxes, the edges seem to get nicks, divots, and other things. I have some older boxes that are in good shape, other than the gaps where the boxes meet. And I assume that they mean are starting to create bigger gaps and warp just a little bit. Happens to all of us. What's the best way to adjust that gap?
There's not much you can do with that, really. I mean, that's just where those boxes start breaking down first. I mean, you can keep repainting it, on those corners so that they don't rot more quickly. Um, Beyond that, there's not much you can do. I mean, it's just where they're going to wear out. The bees will fill that gap with propolis. So if the bees don't like that gap, they're going to fill it with propolis. So I wouldn't
Mhm.
worry about it from the bee standpoint. But yeah, all you can really do as a beekeeper is just keep painting, to keep it from rotting. But that's certainly where you're going to see a box wear out first.
It certainly is because one of our hive tools, right? And it sends to Dennett and said,
Yeah,
well, if you're James Elam, you get white duct tape if your boxes are white, or yellow duct tape if your boxes are yellow.
yeah,
You get where I'm going with that. And you tape that crack wherever that little opening is so that, you
that
know,
works too.
yeah, it does. And I can't tell you how many boxes we have with duct tape. But, in colored duct tape at that. But whatever works, right? Gets you through. Gets you through. All right, number four. Can you thin, and I like this question, can you thin your own no good honey to make syrup? Meaning not sugar based, but excess, not home, sugar and water,
Yeah.
but your excess 2023. This would have been, it should have been 24. I wrote the wrong thing. I'm thinking that they mean from dead outs or treatments, Don't you think that's probably what they mean?
Yeah, or maybe they had some honey that fermented, or
Oh, true.
can you mix a liquid honey with water to thin it and feed it back to the bees? It seems like the answer would be yes, because honey is very good for bees. Unfortunately, the answer is no. We
Mm,
don't want to feed liquid honey to bees, and there's a few reasons for that. One is it's hard to do it in a way that uh, it's thinned down enough so that the bees don't drown in it. But if it's thinned down that much, the bees often won't take it. They don't like honey
mhm,
that thin. They'll drink sugar
mhm,
water that thin, but often they won't drink honey when it's that thin.
mhm,
If you leave it really thick, the bees tend to get stuck in it and die. So doesn't really work from a practical level, but you can also spread disease by feeding honey to bees. Because if that honey came from a hive that had, American foul brood, et cetera, you can spread those spores to other hives. So even though it seems very logical that yes, you should be able to feed a liquid honey to bees, it's generally not recommended to do that.
And you'd think it would be. I
Yeah.
know, I'm with you. I can't add to that. Number five, if I reverse my boxes, do I need to move the feeder? I've been asked this 1,000 times.
Yeah. Excuse me.
That's talking about the internal division board here for
Yeah.
those that don't
You
know.
know, I'm going to say it doesn't matter a whole lot. I mean, generally speaking, I typically like the feeder in the bottom box. Um, well, I like the feeder wherever the bees are because they're going to be more likely to drink that syrup if that feeder is closer to the cluster. So, if the feeder is closer to the bees, they're going to drink it faster.
Hmm.
That's the really only tip. But in most cases, wherever that syrup is, when it's warm outside and it's a healthy hive, they're going to travel to that feeder and drink
Hmm.
the syrup. So if it's convenient and easy to get that feeder next to the bees, go for it. If it's a pain and it's hard to get out and you don't want to do it, don't worry about it. Leave it in whatever box it was. The bees are typically going to get to it just fine once the weather warms up.
And I won't mention any names, but some people I know that live in my household tend to leave a feeder in every box.
That's
So
what I
when you
do.
revert the
Yes.
boxes, it
Yes.
doesn't matter.
Yep, that's what I do too. I mean, I have a feeder, a division board feeder in each of my deep brood
Every
boxes.
box.
Yeah,
I know.
so it
Yeah.
doesn't. Yeah, there's always a feeder there.
There's always a feeder because yeah, there's always a feeder. Oh well, if
Yeah,
y'all were wondering, that's probably a way to get around that. All right, last one. Oh gosh, I wonder what. Yes, yes,
yeah.
I'm no, I'm getting stung through my leather bee gloves. Am I the only one? No. Sorry.
No, you
No.
know, especially when leather bee gloves get a little bit wet,
Yes.
um, or in the fingers, or if they're
Yes.
tight,
Between my
bees can
fingers.
sting through leather. And especially if you've gotten a lot of stings on that leather through the years,
Mhm.
those stingers just kind of work their way into that leather and they start pricking you. So at this point, I do one of two things because I hate being pricked or stung through my leather gloves all the time. I either wear a latex nitrile glove. I put that on first, and then I put my
Mhm.
glove on, which is great because then you never feel the pricks, you never get stung. Some people find those, especially in the summer, kind of hot, and
God.
you get your hands get sweaty, and so they can actually put like a thin cotton glove, like a very, very thin, small cotton glove,
Mhm.
over your hand, and then put your hand into the glove. So
Mhm.
either one of those tends to work. It just creates a second barrier and it prevents all those pricks from the bees getting into that leather glove.
It does. Maybe it's a good excuse to get a new pair.
There you go. Yes, it's usually a sign you need a new pair as well.
It is. It is. And I'll tell you the new our new ones with the short gauntlet with
Yeah,
the
the
Velcro. I
Velcro. Yep,
love them, and they
me
are a
too.
thicker leather. I love them.
Yes.
Shameless
Yep.
plug,
Yep.
but seriously true. Seriously true.
Yes.
All right,
Absolutely.
that's all I've got.
Good. Thank you, Sherry. Those are good questions, folks. Thanks so much. Okay, so January tips. I mean, this is a crazy January. A lot of the country, you heard Sherry talking about it earlier. I mean, a lot of the South is just crazy warm. I mean, we're like, I think where I am in Texas, we're 77 degrees today. We had, short sleeves on Christmas. It's just been a very warm, warm winter. That's not true of the whole country, but a lot of the country is warm. And so you see this all the time. You kind of get these false starts to spring where you'll see dandelions start to bloom and different, you might even see some mustard. I saw some clover the other day, the henbit, and so you'll get these warm weeks or warm 2 weeks. Some flowers will start blooming a little bit. The bees will, because the days are getting longer, the bees will actually brood up some. And then we get these cold, cold weeks where everything kind of reverses. That's pretty normal. That's the normal ebb and flow of bees and growth this time of year. We created this chart a couple years ago. It's generally pretty accurate. I mean, every year can be a little bit different. Every year's always a mystery. It's exactly what the weather's going to be like. But this is generally when we see a significant pollen flow start, based on where in the country you are. So this is a helpful chart to refer back to. Go, okay, so, pick where you are on the map. This is when I typically am going to see dramatic brood rearing begin, when and this isn't just when bees have some pollen on them, because like I said, a warm week, the bees have are bringing in some pollen this week, but our major pollen flow hasn't begun, and for us where I live in Texas, it'll be February 1st to 15th before we see like a sustained pollen flow. That's really the trigger of, okay, I need to make my splits, about a month to a month and a half, after the main pollen flow begins. Because once that main pollen flow begins, the bees start brooding up like crazy. And within 6 weeks or so, you'll need to make splits or they're going to swarm. So yeah, we're seeing, this roller coaster. Longer days are here, so brood rearing is beginning, but there's also little to no pollen depending on your region. You're going to get mild weather, then you're going to get cold weather. The big thing that we'll talk about is making sure your bees have enough food. So you know, down in South Texas, you might have 3 or 4 frames of brood by the end of January. Up in the Dakotas or Minnesota, your bees are still buried under snow for the next 3 months. So, region is everything. So just pay attention to your bees, watch what they're doing, and then use that pollen chart map that I showed you a second ago to kind of give you some predictions on when, your bees are really going to start brooding out. The big thing to focus on this time of year is just winter feeding. The goal is to maintain 30 to 40 pounds of stores in the second box with 3 to 4 frames of honey in the bottom box. So if a hive has less than that and they're a deep box full of bees or more, feed now. Or use a sugar. It's one of Stan's soft sugar bricks works really well. Any kind of feed you're giving them this time of year usually needs to sit directly on top of the cluster to actually get them to take that food. So are going to want to feed 2-to-1 syrup rather than 1-to-1, using a division board feeder or top feeder rather than an entrance feeder, or use one of Stan's soft sugar bricks. But especially in late March, late January through March, really start monitoring those food stores. And bees can starve to death in early spring because they really start brooding up fast and you aren't getting hardly any natural nectar coming in. If you really want to maximize early brood production and population, and a reason for this would be if you want to make a lot of splits, then about 2 weeks before your pollen flow begins, so reference back to that map I showed you, 2 weeks before your main pollen flow begins, start feeding small amounts of 1-to-1 syrup, feed a high protein pollen patty like Global, and then do some open feeding as well. This is going to, a couple weeks early, jumpstart brood production, which is really helpful at having a hive that is growing faster than it might naturally. So this is what I do, when I really want to make a lot of splits, when I need a lot of brood, about 2 to 3 weeks before my major pollen flow begins, I start giving them pollen sub 1-to-1 syrup and do some open feeding. I don't start much before that just because if you start, you know, 4, 5, 6 weeks before your major pollen flow begins, that's just too early. It's going to be hard to get the bees stimulated to start growing, and it's going to be hard for them to maintain that brood production because the weather isn't going to be cooperative. And you get a really cold snap, bees still want to shut down, even if you're feeding them. So I find about 2 to 3 weeks before your main pollen flow is when it's most effective to start feeding that pollen sub. Sherry talked about it a little bit, bees and animal feed and sawdust and neighbors. This is the time of year where I experience the most problems when my bees are really hungry, the weather's warm, but there's absolutely no natural pollen or nectar. And so they're going for chicken feed, they're going for sawdust, they're going for any dust, anything that, excuse me, that resembles pollen. The bees are out hunting for it. And so that's really when the neighbors often complain of, oh, they're eating my chicken feed. Well, they're not eating the chicken feed. They're looking for the dust and they're taking it back to the hive. But feeding open pollen really is the best thing to discourage this. And it's the only thing really I've found that can discourage the bees from going after this dust is by actually providing them something better, which is, a pollen powder. So that's often one of the reasons, if I'm having neighbors complain, I do open feeding, is just to prevent that from being an issue. This works well in December and January. I typically, any of these feeders work. A 5-gallon bucket with the lid cut in half works, and you can kind of fill that bucket with pollen powder, lay it over on its side, and that half lid prevents any from spilling out. I love to use the plastic Pro Nooks. You would just pull, if you see this yellow entrance on it right here, that you can pull that completely off, and that gives a great entrance for the bees to fly in and gather that pollen powder. You can get one of these expensive blue pollen powder feeders as well. I would encourage you, no matter what you use, put it up in a tree because raccoons and possums and mice, everything loves pollen powder. So try to get it up off the ground so that it's not going to, attract too many varmints. Like I said, you can feed pollen patties in January. It will help bees brood up some. I also recommend feeding pollen sub if you have a really cold week. Excuse me. Once the bees have already started brooding up. So if you've already got 2 or 3 frames of brood in the hive, you get this really cold week where the bees can't go out and forage. Then feeding that pollen patty can be really, really helpful so that they continue rearing brood and they don't cannibalize the brood they've already reared. But yeah, whether, January is kind of arbitrary as far as when to start feeding pollen patties, because again, if you're in Minnesota, I wouldn't feed pollen sub until March. The goal is 2 to 3 weeks before your major pollen flow begins. This is a really common question that we often get is my hive queenless or just not raising brood yet? When beekeepers start cracking open their hives on a warm day in the new year and there's no brood at all, they panic and say, oh my goodness, is my hive queenless? Well, here's the key questions I ask to determine if my hive is queen right or not. Is there a pollen flow and do you have food stores? If you've got plenty of food stores in the hive and there's a pollen flow, you should have brood. What are the weekly temperatures like? Is it, 30 degrees during the day, all week long? Well, okay, I wouldn't expect to see too much brood, certainly not many eggs. Did you see eggs and brood during the fall? If you did have eggs and brood in the fall going into winter, you probably still have the queen. What's the population like? Is it just a tiny little ball of bees, or is there 12 frames of bees in there? The more bees there are, the faster you're going to see brood because they can keep the hive warmer. They've got more resources. The bigger the hive, the earlier I expect to see other brood. This is the biggest one. Is there brood in other hives? If I'm seeing brood in all my other hives, and this one particular hive that's an equivalent strength doesn't have brood, that's a bit of a warning sign for me. So generally speaking, if I see a pollen flow, my hive has food stores, the weather's getting warm, I've got a good population, I've got brood in all my other hives, but this one hive doesn't, it probably is queenless. In that case, I might give it another week or so, and then I would combine it with a hive that does have a queen. This is another common thing that a lot of folks see this time of year is moldy frames. Um, a hive that has died will often have some mold on the hive. And whether even if that hive was stored indoors, if it got a little bit of moisture in there, you might see some mold. Luckily, not a big deal. It looks really intimidating. Beekeepers tend to think, oh my goodness, there's this mold, it's going to hurt the bees. I've got to throw it away. But the good news is, it's totally harmless for the bees. What I do is I rinse it out with a water hose, shake the water out of that frame really well. It's imperative that that frame fully dries out. Otherwise, it's just going to grow more mold. And then you can absolutely reuse those frames. So, not a big problem. Something else to keep an eye on is dead bees, what's normal versus abnormal. When you're out checking your hive this time of year, you might see a bunch of dead bees in front of it. That's pretty common because as the weather warms up, the bees haven't flown for a week and then they do fly. They're going to pull any bees that have died out of the hive, throw it on the front door. Dozens of bees are very normal. It's not abnormal to see 50, 60, 70, 100 dead bees. Thousands, that's a problem. That's when I know there's this time of year, often a hive is starved to death. And so if you see thousands of dead bees, yeah, that's probably a starving situation. But a few hundred dead bees, pretty normal this time of year. What to expect to see in hives for January? What should inspections look like? You'll see minimal but increasing brood. Again, that's somewhat region dependent, but most hives start brooding up a little bit in January. You should see some pollen stores, again, depending on the region. Southern regions, you might have a lot by late January. Northern regions, you may have none. You want to have at least 20 to 30 pounds of honey stored in your second box. That's pretty much all I'm looking for in January, not much. Something else you might notice is on warm days in the winter, you might see a sudden flurry of activity on warm days where the bees can fly. Some people think, oh, is my hive swarming? What's going on? It got up to 50 degrees. It's sunny. The bees are flying like crazy. What's happening here? And that's often cleansing flights. So the bees have been cooped up in the hive for 3 or 4 days or 3 or 4 weeks. They haven't been able to go to the bathroom. And so when you finally get a warm day, you might have hundreds of bees coming out, stretching their legs, going to the bathroom, going back in. So that's 99% of the time, that's what you're seeing on those warm winter days is the bees are just coming out, getting a little bathroom break, going back into the hive to hunker down for the rest of the winter. So that's it, folks. I mean, that's the tips for January. I can't wait to see all of you in February because that's when bee season is really ramping up, and we'll progressively have more to talk about every single month through the spring as the bee season continues to just get busier and busier. I hope you have a great January. Please go pre-buy one of those books, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a great day, everybody.